Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine, for a second, a highly anticipated film, featuring literally one of the biggest stars in the country, finally dropping on a major streaming platform after years of delays. The reviews start pouring in, people are calling it the performance of a lifetime, and then, well, just like the missing people it portrays, the movie itself vanishes into thin air. Welcome to our explainer on the gripping mystery of Satluj. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating and honestly deeply controversial story behind a film that was pulled from screens almost as quickly as it arrived.
So, set the scene in your mind. It's the night of July 3rd, 2026. A film just quietly releases on the OTT platform ZEE5 without any massive promotional campaigns, no big fanfare. But the very next day, the lead actor, Diljit Dosanjh, goes live on Instagram. With this eerie calmness, he tells his fans, not to worry if they haven't seen it yet, but casually drops a warning. Download it now because it will probably be deleted by Monday. People laughed. They thought it was just a clever marketing joke. But by Sunday evening, before Monday even rolled around, the screen literally went black for viewers midstream.
So what happened? Why was Satluj removed from India within just 48 hours? ZEE5 released a super brief statement saying the film would be unavailable in India until further notice due to, quote, current circumstances. They didn't mention political pressure, they didn't specify what those circumstances actually were. But here is the real kicker. The film remains perfectly available globally on ZEE5. The entire world can watch this story unfold, except the very country where it happened. This unprecedented digital vanishing act immediately sparked a massive investigation into exactly what this film contained to warrant such a swift ban.
To really understand this ban, we've got to look at the grueling 4-year censorship battle the filmmakers went through before that fateful July night. The film was actually initially titled Ghallughara, which is a historical term for massacres in Sikh history. When they were forced to change that, it became Punjab 95. The censor board's demands were just relentless. They started at 21 cuts and then skyrocketed to 127. They demanded the removal of the hero's real name, any mention of the Punjab police, and get this, even scenes featuring the national flag. So finally, just to bypass this whole gridlock, it was quietly released directly on OTT uncut, under its third name, Satluj.
But to understand why this film faced such an unbelievable struggle, we have to grasp one specific, staggering number: 25,000. You see, this explainer isn't just about a movie, it's about the true story the film is based on. It chronicles the real-life investigation by a man named Jaswant Singh Khalra into 25,000 alleged disappearances in Punjab. 25,000 people who, according to the records he found, were just quietly erased from the system, without trials or traces.
The roots of this story actually stretch back way before the film's release. While 1995 is remembered by a lot of folks for the release of iconic Bollywood blockbusters, in Punjab it was the tail end of a really dark decade of unrest. It kicked off around 1984. The film introduces us to Jaswant Singh Khalra, played by Dosanjh, and he isn't a superhero or a radical. He's just an ordinary bank clerk, a family man. His journey into this darkness begins in early 1995 when a close friend of his, K.P.S, Singh, suddenly disappears. No arrest warrant, no news, just gone. And it's this personal loss that pushes this completely ordinary clerk into a highly dangerous, systematic search for the truth.
The film establishes its tone right out of the gate with this deeply chilling opening sequence. We see a police jeep on patrol in the dead of night. Inside, the officers are exchanging casual, everyday banter, chatting about marriages and promotions. Then they stop, pull out terrified, tied-up civilians from the back and execute them in cold blood. Why? Well, as one officer says in the film, they needed to fulfill an encounter quota to finally get an inspector promotion. The director masterfully uses this scene to highlight the terrifying normalization of state violence, showing how murder gets stripped of anger and turned into just a casual administrative routine.
As Khalra is digging into this, he notices a horrifying trend at local crematoriums, a massive spike in bodies labeled lawaris, which means unclaimed. But how do you prove a state cover-up? Well, Khalra uses his brilliant analytical bank clerk mind. He doesn't look for bodies, he looks for receipts. He calculates the exact amount of firewood purchased by the crematoriums. By comparing those massive firewood receipts with the official, very low death counts, he uncovers undeniable mathematical proof of thousands of undocumented cremations.
The scope of what he found was just staggering. Through his meticulous tracking of firewood and register entries, Khalra discovered that over 2,000 unclaimed bodies had been secretly burned in just 3 specific crematoriums.
Tarn, Padi, and Durgiana. And remember, that was just in 3 locations. When you extrapolate that across the entire region, the scale becomes almost unimaginable. This is exactly how his investigation arrived at the staggering estimate of 25,000 vanished individuals, mapping out this massive, terrifying infrastructure of forced disappearances.
But the film doesn't just show Khalra as this human calculator. It really highlights his profound humanity. In one of the most powerful and quiet scenes, Khalra realizes that heavily armed police are stationed outside his house, spying on him to intimidate his family. Instead of screaming or panicking, he walks out with a tray of tea. He offers it to the very men tasked with terrifying him, simply asking them to leave the cups by the door so his wife doesn't get upset. It's a brilliant cinematic moment. It shows a man fighting a massive, terrifying system with disarming decency.
Now, as soon as this film dropped, and then subsequently vanished, it completely divided the watching public into 2 fierce camps. The conversation online absolutely exploded. So let's take a neutral look at exactly what is driving this deep societal fracture and why these 2 sides see the exact same film in completely opposite ways.
Here is the absolute core of the debate. Side A, the film's supporters, argue that Satluj is a masterpiece. They feel it exposes the hidden truth of state-sanctioned fake encounters and honors a vital, long-suppressed chapter of human rights history. Critics on Side B, however, strongly condemn the film as a dangerous half-truth. They argue that it almost entirely ignores the brutal reality of Khalistani terrorism at the time, the targeted killings of innocent civilians, bombings, and the extreme daily dangers that the police forces were facing on the ground.
This clash over legacy is perfectly illustrated by the film's characters. The film features a character named DGP Inderpal Singh Bitta, who's portrayed as this ruthless enabler of police atrocities who demands results and ignores the violent methods used to get them. Critics of the film point out this is a clear stand-in for the real-life DGP, K.P.S. Gill. To many, Gill is considered a heroic super cop who successfully broke the back of terrorism and restored peace to Punjab. They argue that portraying him solely as a villain completely erases his critical service to the nation.
The controversy gets even deeper with how the film portrays the assassination of Chief Minister Jaswant Singh. In the cinematic narrative, this tragic event is framed almost as a direct, inevitable reaction to extreme state cruelty, like a pressure cooker finally exploding. Critics, on the flip side, are outraged by this framing. They argue that it dangerously justifies violence and completely ignores what they point to as the documented, calculated Khalistani conspiracy and terror network that orchestrated the assassination.
Getting back to the film's narrative, Khalra's relentless pursuit of truth ultimately seals his fate. On September 6, 1995, he is abducted in broad daylight from right outside his home. But his voice had already reached too far, going all the way to the Canadian Parliament. The Supreme Court steps in and orders a CBI investigation. Eventually, an insider, a special police officer, risks his life to testify about what he saw in the illegal torture cells. This leads to the conviction of 6 police officers to life in prison. But the film, and the real-life critics of the system, note a really tragic irony here. Only 6 junior officers face justice. The powerful higher-ups who built the quota system remained entirely untouched.
Which brings us to a final, kind of poetic mystery. When the censor board stripped the film of its original titles, Ghallughara and Punjab 95, the filmmakers chose the name Satluj. But why? Name a heavy political thriller after a river.
Well, according to the CBI investigations and court testimonies, after Jaswant Singh Khalra was murdered, his body was allegedly taken to the Harake area and thrown right into the waters where the Satluj and BS rivers meet. Like so many of the 25,000 vanished souls he tried to find, his body was never recovered. The filmmakers chose the name Satluj because the river became the final, silent guardian of the missing. It was literally the only witness left to those who were denied a final prayer. We're going to end this explainer with a really haunting metaphor delivered by Khalra during a speech in Canada. He told a story about the setting sun, asking who would provide light when it was gone. While the whole world stayed silent, a tiny clay lamp spoke up and said, "I challenge the darkness." Jaswant Singh Khalra was that small lamp. And it leaves us with a provocative thought to ponder today. If this film, which presents documented court records of this dark history, is quietly deleted from our screens, what happens to a society when the light is forced back into the dark? Thank you for joining us. Keep questioning and keep learning.